Hey, this is Kenneth, and today I'm going to show you how to cut with a DeWalt Radial Arm Saw. Now, the Radial Arm Saw is one of the two basic pieces of equipment for doing serious cuts. The other one being the table saw behind me. So what the Radial Arm Saw is ideal for is for cross cuts. The two types of cuts are cross cuts, which goes across the grain, and rip cuts, which go along the grain of the wood. Now there's a bunch of other sophisticated cuts, but I won't get into those until I talk to you about the table saw, which I'll do later. So the Radial Arm Saw is a real simple tool. Before we get into exactly how to operate it, let's talk about the basics again. Safety, hearing, eye protection, hearing protection, and try not to stick your fingers in there. The appendage of choice for the Radial Arm Saw is your left thumb, because when you're cutting, it's a real tendency that people are going to want to take their hands and put it like that. And that's a bad deal, because that, you cut it off. It's bad. So anyways, I'll get you a little bit closer shot of this. I'll show you exactly how to set it up, all the different ways that you can move the blade around, and then I'll show you how to cut. So first I'm going to show you how to do a basic straight cross cut. So on the Radial Arm Saw we have a 10-inch cross cut blade. That's as opposed to a ripping blade, which I will show you the differences between those blades in the table saw video. Now I will very carefully measure out how long the cut is I want to make, and using a carpentry square and a pencil I would then mark where I want this cut. Now I bring the material in, and you have to remember the blade has a thickness. It's about 1/8 of an inch. And so before you cut, you want to bring the blade up, and you'll want to line up where you want the cut with the right side or the left side, depending on what is the good material that you want to save. You'll line it up so that the line is on one specific side of the blade or the other. Actually cutting itself is real easy. Keeping your left thumb out of the way of the blade, you'll push the material up against the deck, and then very slow you'll turn it on, and then very slowly feed this across, back, turn it off, and then you'll be able to take your material out. Now, other cuts that you can make with a Radial Arm Saw is that you can do miter cuts, which is where you will swing the blade horizontally. You'll also be able to do bevel cuts, where you'll rotate the blade horizontal this way. So to do the miter cut, up here, this is the miter release lever. So you would pull that forward, and then the entire carriage will rotate. Before you do that, though, you want to make sure that you raise the blade up high enough that it doesn't catch anything on the table. So you would pull it, set it out back here is a dial to show you exactly what angle you want to go to, and it has stops at 45, because most of your miter cuts you're going to be doing, you're going to want a 45-degree angle. So this would be for any sort of detail work on corners, anything like that. Now to do bevel cuts, what you do is up here in the front there is a release. So this right here is about the equivalent of this, and then there's a set pin. So we'll first want to crank the saw up quite a bit more. Release the bevel clamp, pull this pin, and then the blade will click in at 45 degrees. So now you can cut a bevel into the material instead of a miter or a straight cut. Finally, something that you can do with the Radial Arm Saw that I tend not to do is that you can actually use it to do a rip cut. So with the grain of the wood running this way, typically you use the Radial Arm Saw to cut it crosswise, which is a cross cut. But if you have a long board that you want to split, you can actually take the Radial Arm Saw, bring it out, and rotate it 90 degrees, and then you can set it up to do a cross cut. So to do that, you can bring the carriage out. Carriage lock lever is right there. Release the yoke. So this lever right here releases the yoke, and it has a set pin on the other side. And there's a little little sticky because I actually really don't do this. You can actually rotate the blade. Now this is important when you're ripping that you feed it in the right direction. So where cross-cutting you cut into the board, with ripping you cut away from the board. There's a label on the side that says rip only from this direction. So once you have it rotated, you would set the width of the rip that you want to do, lower the blade down to the table. This right here is the kickback paw, because as you're ripping, it's going to want to kick the blade back, and so you will actually bring this paw down. First you'll set the front guard. So for example, with this real thin piece of wood, you would set it something like that, and then this kickback paw you want to set so as the wood goes under it, it just bites it. So now as you're ripping this very long board that we have here, if it were ever to kick back, these paws could actually bite into it and keep it from kicking back into you. Again, this is something that I tend not to do on the radial arm saw. I much prefer to do this on the table saw, so I'll show you how to do that later. So now that I've showed you all of the different cuts that you can do with the radial arm saw, I'll show you what it actually looks like to do a basic cross cut. Now before we get started, again, hearing protection, eye protection, and you'll notice I'm going to be very careful about not sticking my fingers into the blades. I've just plugged the radial arm saw in because I had it unplugged while we were playing around so far. Line the material up. So I'm going to say this is the good piece that I actually have measured. So I want to line it up so that the pencil mark is on the near side of the blade. So that's right there. So now I'll put my hearing protection on, start it up, and cut it. So, as you can see, that was real fast and easy. Comes out with a clean cross cut. Now, if you wanted to cut a lot of pieces the same, you could actually take a second block of wood and clamp it to the table so that it would always has a stop. And you can do this real fast and easy, so it's a real easy tool. So this has been Kenneth, showing you how to use a DeWalt radial arm saw, and try not to cut your hands off.